Hi, I'm Daniel Fisher here at Sweetwater Sound, and today I'm really excited to show you the Behringer Odyssey. And it is a 2-oscillator synthesizer that can do paraphonic duophony. It can do 2 notes at a time, although they do share the same filter and amp, but you can have 2 different pitches like I did in the beginning. Some interesting things. This one comes with an effects section designed by Klark Teknik, and like a lot of synthesizers, this has the proportional pitch control, or PPC, which lets you do pitch bending with pressure as well as vibrato, as opposed to having 2 wheels. You've got portamento, you've got a 2-octave up and down transpose switch. You could do coarse and fine frequencies on both. You can also make the first oscillator to have the keyboard turn off, and it makes it just a low frequency oscillator that you can use as a modulator for something else. You've got oscillator sync on oscillator 2. You've got a choice of both sawtooth and square, which can have pulse width modulation on both of them. You've got a sample and hold, and a true sample and hold, in that you've got something to sample, literally sample and hold. You have your choices for that here with your mixer. You've got a white and pink noise generator. You've got a lag processor. You've, like I said, you've got portamento that can be switched on the front. You've got a separate headphones out with its own volume. You've got a regular line level out. This can obviously do MIDI. You've got a standard ADSR envelope that can be assigned to the pitch of oscillators 1 and 2. You can also assign it to the cutoff frequency of the filter, and you can also send it to the amplifier. You've also got an AR, basically a simpler version that's attack and release, that can be assigned anywhere you see AR. In fact, all of it's labeled pretty well, but if you've never dealt with this kind of synthesizer, which is very similar to the 2600, the biggest difference, of course, is that it doesn't have all the jacks to let you do different kind of connections. This is all kind of pretty much pre-configured, although you do have jacks for control voltage, for your pitch and gate, and a trigger. This also has a sequencer that you can store a bunch of 32-note sequences. It's got an arpeggiator, and it has a knob that lets you change the LED brightness all the way from off to full on. I like it on. I like pretty lights. And that's pretty much it. So now let's just go and listen to each of the individual parts. First, I'm going to turn off oscillator 2 from the audio mixer. I'm going to throw the filter all the way open. We're going to talk more about the filter in a second. There's 3 different kinds. I have the high pass all the way down, so it's pretty much off. I'm turning the drive off. I have the VCA gain off so it doesn't drone on me. And I'm going to make the ADSR go full sustain, and got my portamento off. So that should just give me a plain note. Now I'm going to start with the sawtooth. Now if I turn that up 2 octaves, now we get this. And if I do it from up here, and then I have a fine tuning as well. And you should know about this synth that it's not a preset synthesizer. Everything is to be moved in real time, including the tuning of the oscillators. So you don't just throw a switch for 8-foot, 2-foot, 4-foot, things like that. You literally have to move the knobs where you want them to do. It's a handy thing, and it's also a difficulty depending on your situation. The handy and very musical thing is that in all cases, you can just start moving the frequency of this thing freely, both in a coarse way and a fine way. But if you're doing a studio recording, you're going to need a tuner always nearby so that you can make sure it's the way you want it to be. So now I'm going to do the square wave, which can also be pulse, and I'm going to do that by throwing the switch to square wave. This is oscillator 1. And now I'm going to do pulse width modulation. I have the mod slider. The switch is currently set to LFO, which is at this rate here, and so I'm going to do pulse width modulation. And now I'll just do it manually. Really beautiful as it's moving through that. And you've already heard it modulated with an LFO. Now I can also modulate it with the ADSR. As I mentioned before, I can turn off the keyboard from Oscillator 1, turning that into a very low frequency oscillator, even lower than I'd played before. Very, very slow. And then Oscillator 2 is very similar in that I have the sawtooth and the square wave, which can be pulse, which can be modulated in the same way. But now, instead of disconnecting the keyboard, Oscillator 2 does oscillator sync, so I can get all those kinds of sounds. So now, as I throw on oscillator sync, Oscillator 2 will be synced to Oscillator 1, meaning regardless of where I move its pitch, it will have elements of the pitch of the other oscillator, as well as harmonics from this oscillator, and I'll sweep through those. Now, if I do that as a square wave, this is going to sound really interesting. I'll do the same thing, but I'm also going to have some pulse width modulation, and I'm going to turn on a little delay and reverb just to hear these harmonics sweep through time. And so, like I said before, those frequencies can be moved by an LFO, by an ADSR, or even sample and hold. So you can get all kinds of really neat sync sweeps. So now for FM on Oscillator 1, I currently have the switch set to LFO at a sine wave, and I can do just standard vibrato stuff. I could also do that with a square wave. You can do it with sample and hold, get that little computer sound. And then finally, I can use the ADSR also to do pitches. So you can really hear this synth is a lot about modulation. And of course, it being analog, it's going to modulate with no problems. So now, on the next one, I could do the same thing, but as a different choice for one of the FM choices, I can have the pedal. So there's a pedal input for an expression pedal, and I can sweep pitch on that, which will let you do those oscillator sync things by foot, which is very, very musical. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the 3 filter types. There's a 2-pole, the 4023, a 4-pole, the 4035, and a 4-pole 4075. And I'm going to start with the 2-pole. The resonance is all the way down, the cutoff's all the way up. I'm going to add VCO2 to VCO1. They're both currently on sawtooths, so we'll get a nice sound here. And now I'm going to slowly bring down the cutoff of the 2-pole. Now I'm going to move on to the 4-pole, the 4035. And the 4-pole 4075. Now 2-pole with half resonance. Same thing with the 4-pole 4035. And the 4-pole 4075. Now I'll go full resonance. This is self-oscillating on the 2-pole. Four-pole 4035. And the 4-pole 4075. It's interesting how each of the different filters reacts with different amounts of resonance. So now I'm going to do half resonance. I'll start with the 2-pole, the 4023. The 4-pole 4035. And the 4-pole 4075. And now full resonance, 2-pole. Wow. And the 4-pole 4035. And the 4-pole 4075. Now again, I can modulate those with the LFO or the sample and hold, which I did in the intro. I've also got my choice of ADSR or AR for that. But on this one, I can also do sample and hold mixer or pedal, which means I can put the expression pedal in here and sweep the filter manually for like a manual wah-wah effect. And the next filter is a high pass, which I can take the bottom off of like this. So now I'm going to turn on the drive switch, which is next to the high pass filter. And I brought the volume down a little because it's going to get a lot louder. And the interesting thing to notice is that when the distortion's on, you really notice it when you use the paraphony and you have two notes playing against each other through the drive. That really makes a different sound for that. And then last, I'll talk about the effects section over here by Klark Teknik. And you have a lot of different choices. I got a gated 1 and 2, reverse reverb, a delay, an echo, an ambience, an early reflection, chorus, flanger, phaser, pan tremolo, detune, pitch shifter, delay and chorus, delay and reverb, chorus and reverb, LFO and filter, talk box, clipper. A lot of variations on that. I'll show you the proportional pitch control real quick. Well, that's just a really quick look at a really beautiful synthesizer. This is the Behringer Odyssey. If you have any further questions about it, please contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. My name is Daniel Fisher. Thank you very much for watching.